Hello, welcome to Mapping Osiris. This is part 5, and this is going to be the last video we make for Egypt, unless I can see some other things that need to be discussed. Before I get started, I just want to let everybody know that the amount of work that has gone into this is absolutely incredible. And so what I have discovered here is revolutionary, and it really has a lot to do with the human race. It has a lot to do with our past, and I believe that the evidence that has been surmounted so far should really not be ignored by anyone. So please, if you find this information useful, please share it with your friends. This kind of information that I'm about to show you right here is something that is extremely important that we share with everyone, because it has a lot to do with our past and uncovering it. It has a lot to do with us. It has a lot to do with reality. And I think this is paramount that this information gets out. And as you know, I've been putting all this information out for everyone. I haven't asked for anything, just the whole idea of being able to get this information out to everybody has been extremely important to me, and I believe that that is one of the main reasons why this information is continues to come to me. I think there has something to do with that. So far, what I've shown you about Egypt is that the Nile Delta area that you see there at the top, I've been mapping the human skull to that. And I discovered all of this, once again, by going into the cathedrals, and it eventually led me to Egypt. We're not going to cover Orion at the moment. We're going to cover Egypt today. But I've shown you just an enormous amount of evidence that that area up at the top that you see there, called Osiris, has something to do with the human skull. What we're gonna do today is we're going to map the whole body on Egypt. Now, this is where a lot of the overlaying and the images and stuff like this comes in handy, because this is getting into the minds of the ancient Egyptians. Words and language, as I've said before, is a filter, and once you start running things through words and language, you start losing things, you start misunderstanding things. The amount of depth that I could go into in this particular part is so deep, but I don't want to make everybody's eyes blur over it. The amount of information that has come out of this is unbelievable. It has a lot to do with our reality and the way the holographic universe kind of works as well. But indeed, what we're going to get out of this is we're going to start seeing the different scales of man, from when you really start taking a look at it. And this is the way the ancient Egyptians thought. They believed that the whole cosmos, the whole universe, was different scales of man. And they couldn't have been more correct. What we're about to see here is something we're going to be using phi and mathematics, okay? And basically it's just geometry. We're not going to be doing any hardcore number crunching, because we don't need to do that. All we need to do is pull out our trusty golden rectangle and start mapping phi. And we're going to notice some very interesting things, because when you first look at the Nile and the Nile Delta, you don't really notice probably, but it's actually the nervous system of a man, and he is facing to the right. And if you follow the mouth of the Nile Delta, right here, right where it comes in here, and you follow this along, this area that you see right here would go right into the neck, the shoulder area, the rib cage, coming down here all the way to the sacrum, and right here is where the Temple of Man in Luxor is located. I think I've got it. It's right over here. Yeah. Here's where it's located. So here's our goal. Our goal is going to be a couple of things here. This is where the Temple of Man is located. And you remember that I showed you before, what this does is it maps out the human body. Now, if you were going to begin a journey understanding more about the human body, And let's say, for example, that the ancient Egyptians knew that the Nile and the Nile Delta mapped to the human body. Then wouldn't it seem like this would be the great place to start? Because you're getting kind of a map to begin with. It tells you what, it kind of tells you the whole layout, kind of before you begin. And from there, you move up and down the Nile. Now, it is a fact that when you look at the pyramid texts, when you look at the Book of Coming Forth by Day, which is a misnomer when people call it the Book of the Dead, it's actually the Book of Coming Forth by Day. And it describes what you must do in order to pass these certain levels, and what it speaks of, as well as the pyramid texts, when you start reading into them, is it starts using the Nile and the Nile Delta metaphorically to describe different areas. For example, as I've said before, and you've seen before, this area up at the top here called Osiris, and I want you to notice where it's located. This is going to be important, because what our journey is going to be to go from the Temple of Man in Luxor, and this is going to be where the sacrum starts, or actually this will be the middle of the sacrum, and we're going to move our way up the Nile, and we should basically end right here where Osiris is, the place where the soul is found, is what they said. And we're going to see why all this is relevant, because when we map the human body using phi to all of this, we're going to see how all of these things fall exactly, almost, minus probably my own small errors from zooming in and creating all these golden rectangles and stuff to create phi for the human body. We're going to kind of see a really good idea of what they were doing. And what they did was they placed these temples along the Nile according to the human body. But the first thing that we have to do is we have to take a look and see that the Nile absolutely maps to the human body. And as I've shown you before up here at the top, the reason I was performing all those overlays and showing you that this area is like a human head, and the reason I showed you the Eye of Ra, and I showed you that you can look at it one way and you can see vertebrae, you can look at it another way and you can see the internal parts of the brain, all in one hieroglyph. This is exactly the way land does. Land is showing us a human head right here, but it's showing us different areas. Some of it is bone, some of it is the waterways like we saw before, which basically, if I show you this right here, if I show you the water body outlines, we saw that these mapped to different arteries that you see in the head and so forth. This area that you see right here goes right through the eye where the optic chiasm is. We're going to see all of this and how it, and when you take a look at the inside of a skull with the head facing to the right, this pattern that you see right here, the mouth going into the Nile, is exactly the way it's shaped. So, let's go ahead and get started. So right here, I'm looking inside the Temple of Man, or excuse me, the Temple in Man, which is the name of the book that R.A. Schwaller de Lubic's wrote. You're going to notice that this guy right here is facing towards us, right? You notice this building, it kind of has a slant to it. So it kind of comes up. See this angle? If you go from this door to this door and it comes up, it kind of has an angle right here in the middle. And he's facing towards us. And in this one here, you can see that he's facing to the side. This is going to be important when we start taking a look at this stuff, because as we look at the Nile, it will be important to visualize it, both with a man standing at his profile, and also back, straight towards us, and because we're going to be looking at the spinal column in a profile, and also facing right towards us, anterior, posterior. So we're going to be looking at a profile section of the spinal column and an anterior, posterior section of the spinal column. And then we're going to look at the two of them, and based on the visualizations and the curves and phi, we'll have a good idea where we are. Now, here's the interesting thing about it all. as we begin to map Egypt using phi and comparing it to the human body, just like the area that I showed you up here that mapped the skull. And this is extremely important because this right here shows something about our reality. So if you have to remember anything, remember some of these visualizations that you're about to see. Because what we're going to see here is that when we start mapping the human body here, that we should see things along this Nile that are shaped the same and cover and have the same curves and are very it should be very obvious to you that we are seeing something that is mimicking the human nervous system. But the way the Nile does that is it does it in a couple of different ways. It shows you the human nervous system, but it does it in a combination of anterior, posterior, and a profile. We'll see how that comes into play here in just a second. Okay, do you remember this hieroglyph in this graphic? This is important because with this piece of information, it gives us a great idea of knowing where to start and where to end. And apparently what they were measuring is they were measuring the tip of where the coccyx is, which is the very tip of the sacrum area, and they were going from there to this area where the pineal gland is located, right where these three come together. Now I've got another graphic. What I did was I overlaid the Eye of Ra on top of this that we have seen before, because I wanted to get a good idea to make sure that everything was falling into place. So first, let's take a look at the hieroglyph by itself without anything on it. Now there is something here. You see this? It looks like a guy with his arms stretched out inside this box. Well, he's actually following the lines of the spinal cord or the vertebrae. And what you're going to notice is these four dark areas right here. If you create a line all the way around them, what you're actually creating is the same thing that you see right here. You see how those follow the same lines? And then what happens is underneath that you start getting the fingers that went out. These two fingers right here and this one right here was the ring finger. So when we take a look at this right here, we can see how those fall in line. Okay. Now here's one where we have it mapped, so we already know that our vertebrae is correct on here. And then we put the Eye of Ra on here, and the Eye of Ra that you see right here is important because it shows us something. It shows us that at the very top of the spinal cord, it's not the thalamus. And there's a couple of people that had a discussion with this a while back. I believe it was Gary Osborne. He has a website, but it's not the thalamus that they're interested in. It's the pineal gland. And when you come up to the very top of this, where these three lines meet, it meets exactly where the pineal gland is located. You'll notice that the Eye of Ra, the throne right here, follows right down the spinal cord. What you're also going to notice too is this triangular region that you see right here is also right here as well inside the throne. So this is mapped correctly. So when we back out and we take a look at the Eye of Ra, what we're actually interested in is we're interested in the pineal gland. That's what we're going to get to. And this is the location of where Osiris is. And we're going to see that it maps, well, you'll see. It's pretty damn amazing. Okay, so here's where we start taking a look at the golden rectangles. Now, all this stuff, the reason I made that part last time to show you so that this doesn't look like a bunch of mess to you and your eyes don't blur over. Let me tell you what we've done here. So, the first thing, we have this one rectangle stretching this whole area that you see right here. From there all the way to there is the first golden rectangle. You'll notice because we have a really thick line right here, and that's our first line, which is basically the first line that you would see in phi. Okay, so what we needed to do in order to capture all of the important points And you'll notice that all of the tips of the sacrums here, they're all lined up. And so it's helpful to have an anterior-posterior view as well as a profile view, so you can see what you're looking at. So I can see that this is the top of the sacrum, but it seems to be located right here where I can't see it. But it's also helpful to be able to see this up and down, or anterior-posterior as well. You're going to see now, I'll notice that the rib cage right here follows the same line as what you see right here, and the bottom rib is also, the way they are attached, they're attached up here, but the rib comes down here. But you're going to notice that where the rib ends is the same place where the rib ends right here. And so all of these lines that you see, so right here, the first place, this area that you see right here was the area where his thumb was being used as one of the sections on the spinal column. And that was an important section because this is also where the heart is located as well. And we're going to see that here as we go on. So what we had to do here is we had to basically create these golden rectangles. And what I did was I would create a large one and then I would flip it. So you'll see it, and where they spiral and end, you'll notice that they create smaller and smaller areas. So like, for example, this largest one that I did that went from here all the way around, you can see that it curls in and it creates these smaller boxes, and each one of these lines that you see right here you can use to mark off and draw all the way through this thing. That's how it all works. So this is not something that's just a mess right here. All these little boxes that you see right here are all based on phi. And in order to map the human body and figure out what these ancient Egyptians were doing, I had to create a bunch of these. And when we get up into the head, this is important. You'll notice that at each one of these areas that you see right here, you'll see that it's an important area. This is, well, we'll see where that is. This is basically where the Great Pyramids are. And you can see that this area right here is just below this throne. And then, of course, the area that you see right up here is where the pineal gland is located. And as we travel down this thing, we have these different areas. The reason that this is marked off as sacrum, stomach, heart, throat, these have to do with chakras, is what we're going to find out. But it also has to do with sections of the body. The heart section is actually a very large section that we see right here. But we're going to see that the curvature of the Nile and what it's actually doing will actually mimic the human body. Now, we're interested in starting at the sacrum. The sacrum is where the Temple of Man is located in Luxor, and that's located right here. And that, the sacrum is, it would be considered your second chakra. The first chakra would be your root chakra. So even though we're not covering that, and that's not what they put on the was staff, for the purpose of visualization, to show you the first part of the human body, and how it appears the same as an actual nervous system. This right here is an actual brain that you see right here, and this is your spinal cord going down. And you're going to notice the way that it ends, and it ends in this this thing right here that kind of spreads out into 4 or 5 different pieces. When we take a look here at the Nile area, we see something that looks very similar, like we're looking at the bottom of a spinal cord. So I wanted to show you that real quick because that's located just below the sacrum, and that's the next area that we're going to take a look at right here. And we're going to see the curvatures and how it matches also the human nervous system. So this is the area that we see, and you notice I've got some golden rectangles all over the place. But you will see that we just covered the root, which was right here. And you'll notice that when I drop another golden rectangle down, how it ends right in the middle of this thing, right where it frays out. And this is where we start the human body. So when we take a look at the sacrum right here, and this is where the Temple of Man is located, right there basically, then if we overlay the skeleton on top, we notice that there is the same curvature in the sacrum that we're looking at right here on the Nile. Okay, this is our first area that we're going to look at here. And we're going to take a look at several different pictures of this. Okay, so then we start moving up the Nile, and so we get into the stomach area, and notice the way that the Nile is actually following. It's actually following at an angle, and then, interestingly, it veers off to the left very hard right when it gets to this particular phi area right here. And this is also where the beginning of the rib cage is. So we can see this, and as it goes up the rib cages, we can see that the Nile is following the rib cages out, and then it follows them back in again, just like you see right here. This area that you see right here, where I've got this heart chakra symbol, is important because when we take a look, this is exactly where the heart is located in the human body. It's located in the area which is basically right in the middle of the rib cage. So this is where the heart would be located, right here. And you can see how the Nile follows the rib cages as they come up. And then we have this throat area right here. And the throat area comes up, and then the spinal cord, or the spinal column, ends right here where this throne area is. So this is the first diagram we're going to take a look at right here. Some very interesting things to look at right here are when you take a look at phi, when we start mapping, the idea that you have the same curvature going on right here is pretty impressive. And the way this follows up and then veers as soon as it gets to the rib cage, and then follows the curves of the rib cage all the way out and all the way back in. You can see right now, as you're starting to look at this, according to the human nervous system, that it's following the same curves. Now we're looking at it from, let's compare what we just saw right here to what the profile looks like. Now you can see when you get to the top of the Nile how the neck curves right here, which also curves the same as what you're seeing right here as well. You take a look at the spinal column as it goes down, and you map it at the same. It covers the same thing that you're seeing right here as what you're seeing. So you almost get like a down here at the sacrum area, you get the view of an anterior posterior, but when you get to the top here, following the rib cage and going into the throat, at this point you see it as a profile view. But you could also take a look at the sacrum right here, and looking at it like this, you could also get the same curvature. So it gives you a good idea of the way that you're looking at the sacrum, both anterior and posterior, and also front and backwards. All this is mapped perfectly to phi. Okay, all that's really important. Also, one more thing I wanted to show you real quick. Right here, where this line is, you see the pyramids? Well, this is also located in the exact same place as what's called the pyramids of the brain, and they're located right there. And that's also, and you'll notice the way that you see the way this gets thinner right here and it gets thicker right here? That's the same thing that's happening right here in the Nile. It's thick and then it moves into the spinal cord right here. So the Great Pyramids are located basically right here. So here's where it starts getting fun. Here's our diagram again, with all our golden rectangles. And so I thought that since I am using this hieroglyph right here and mapping it to the body, that it would be helpful just to go ahead and take the Nile and overlay it on top of this, starting at where we saw the sacrum start and ending at the top area. So what I did is I took the Nile and I overlaid it on top of this. You're going to notice that right down here, this is our sacrum right here, and you can see that it follows the same curve here and the same curve here. This is all based on phi. Right here is the end of the was staff and the end of the sacrum, and then coming down here to the root. This is below the sacrum right here. And then as we follow it up, as you can see right here where the first rib is, let's take a look right here, where this first rib is right here, as we go across, the Nile veers to the right, and then it follows up the line of the spinal cord that you're seeing right here. And as you can see, it follows the curvature of the neck, and then it opens up into the exact same thing that you would see if you're looking inside of a skull. So when we look inside of a human skull, right here, I want you to take a look at the way the black area right here, you see the way this follows? It kind of narrows. You can see the cerebellum, the pons, and everything. It all fits in this area that narrows down into the spinal column. That's exactly what is going on right here with the Nile as it goes down into the Nile, or the Nile delta as it goes into the Nile. We're seeing the exact same thing. What else you might notice too, that's really pretty obvious as well, is you'll notice that the bone of the nose right here is also following the line of the land right here. So when you put the skull in a profile and look at the way that the Suez Canal follows right through the eye, just like the skull. Now, based on phi, this is an MRI of a heart, and it's a mirror image view. So imagine that this is flipped horizontally. Notice where the heart is located and the way the spinal cord curves, and this is exactly where the heart is actually located. So where his thumb is where the heart begins. And if we take a look at phi, our phi ratio right here, this is this phi right here, the thick line, is basically appears to be where the heart ends. So here's your thick line right here coming through. So this is where his thumb is right where the heart starts, and right here on this major phi line is where the heart ends. Notice the way that the spinal column is curved and where the heart is located. So where this thumb is on him is where the heart starts, the actual heart itself. And you'll also notice that this is the area of the Nile that it should be where the heart is located, based on the curvature that you're seeing with the rib cages and everything. And as you can see right here, here is where this rib starts, and here's where the Nile veers off and follows the spinal cord as it goes up, and then right into the neck area like we would expect. It's mimicking the human nervous system. Now let's take a look at another graphic, which is almost the same thing, except what I have on this graphic is I have these various temples located on the Nile. And this is where the Temple of Man is located. The Temple of Man is located just above the coccyx, where the sacrum begins. You can see the curvature of the sacrum is the same. Abydos is located on the next phi line that you see right here, and is located still in the sacrum area. Acmeme is also located on a phi line as well, and is located just at the top of the sacrum. And as we move up, right where the rib cages start, we have Asiyut, which is located right here. So at the right edge of these red lines is where the actual temples are located. And so you can see what it's trying to do is it's following the spinal cord all the way up. These various temples are located in key areas. So then you have Armana and Hermopolis, and they're located in the lower rib cage. This whole area, though, is considered the heart chakra right here. This whole area of the rib cage is considered the heart chakra. And I'm not familiar with all of the temples on the Nile. I'm sure there's really important areas that I'm not familiar with and everything. But here's we move up the Great Pyramids are located on a phi line compared to everything else, and this is exactly where everything starts moving into the base of the skull. And as you can see, this trapezoid right here is showing you the pons area, and then right up here is Busiris. Now let me show you something interesting about this, because when we come back to our Google Earth, this is where Busiris is located. This is my doing using phi, and this is where it gives it to us the coordinates. If you go and look up Busiris, it gives you the coordinates right here. You'll notice that there's some key areas you can look at. These grayed out areas right here that create kind of like a, well, what you're actually kind of seeing right here in a way is you're seeing a picture of Orion, the constellation of Orion, but right here you kind of have this triangular region, and that's the same as this triangular region that you see right here. And right along the Nile, which is right here, is a difference basically between this and that. The coordinates that I'm given is basically right here, and what I'm shown based on phi and everything I've done is right there. So we have gone from the human body all the way down to where the sacrum is, where the temple of man starts, moving our way up, seeing these various temples along the way, with the Nile following the outline of the body and making curvatures at very key points, following the rib cage, going all the way up to the neck area, and then moving into the head. And you can see where the throne is, you can see where the Eye of Ra is, and right at the very top here, exactly where Busiris is located, where they said the place that the soul was found is located exactly in the same place as the pineal gland. So this is a very important discovery, because what this shows us is it shows us that these Egyptians knew that the Nile mimicked man. It shows that they had temples placed in these certain areas based on this. This opens a whole new door into understanding what they were talking about when they wrote certain things in metaphors about certain cities. Like I had suspected and told you a while back, the reason that they mentioned Busiris as the place the soul was found is because it's based on the area where the pineal gland is located. And that was all discovered originally by finding that Orion Nebula had matched on top of the Nile Delta, and we can see that the Orion Nebula is basically a brain. So the interesting thing about all this is it tells us a little bit more about our reality. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop there, and the next time that we make one of these videos, I think I'm going to show you the multiple pyramids that make up man. Here's why. When we take a look at the spinal cord right here, you'll notice that it follows this line, and you see how it ends up slightly to the right of his staff? We have this this area right here and the sacrum lining up in a straight line, but then when we end up at the top, we're slightly right. Right? Well, the same thing happens that from here, where the Great Pyramids are, and if we follow that trapezoid, you can see that the same angle occurs, because we're moving from here, and then we get up all the way up to here, and then here's the thalamus right here. So we have this same thing going on. So when we map these pyramids of the body, we can take a look at the pyramid as being the whole, as the head only, or we can take a look at it as being the whole body from the sacrum to the pineal gland. And let me show you an interesting piece of alchemy I found with Ari Schweller de Lubeck's. This is the front cover page of Ancient Egypt, Science and the Evolution of Consciousness. I'll point out some alchemy to you. So I don't know if he did this intentionally or not, but I'm sure that he probably did. What you're going to notice here is you have the tree, and this basically follows the logic of what I'm telling you about the pyramids goes. You have the tree here, and the tree actually represents a large head. And then you have a person standing inside the tree, and you notice that his eye, where it's located, is located right in the center of the tree. And if you notice where this branch is and how it follows along, it's basically this Eye of Ra. So what happens is if you put the Eye of Ra on top of that, you'll notice where his eye is, and his eye is right where the pineal gland is. And then you see these various areas following the tree. And so what this tells us is kind of deep, and we'll go into that into another subject. What we could basically keep doing is we could keep expanding our pyramids out from a pyramid that covered the whole human body to a larger one that covered the head. And as we keep going, the pyramids can keep getting larger and larger, and you keep getting larger versions of man. That's what kind of ends up happening. Here's an example of the curvature that I'm talking about and what kind of actually happens with the pyramid. So this is probably a little bit before I had measured the sacrum just perfectly and everything. So, pardon me on that part, because I needed to look a little bit closer. But still, the general idea is still there. What you're going to notice here, though, is the curvature of the spine and this smaller person standing in the pyramid right here. And then you can also see that this head is the whole thing. This is the same kind of idea that you got right here, but the eye ends in the exact same place every time, which is right at the tip of the king's chamber. So you're going to notice on the smaller scale person, it's in the same place as the larger scale, which is the whole head. And this is kind of the way that it ends. And think about the pineal gland that I was showing you as a black hole, and it kind of spirals out. So everything ends up spiraling back into the one point, which is where the pineal gland is located. And that's kind of the way the universe replicates things in a way. We'll have to go into that in another video. It gets kind of deep into the whole reality thing. But I wanted to show you, by using phi and mapping the human body and the nervous system, that basically that's what we're seeing. We are seeing that the whole Nile and the Nile Delta is a larger scale of man, and the Egyptians knew this. They placed their temples along the Nile based on this. They had the Temple of Man located in Luxor, right where the sacrum would be, just as if somebody were traveling a journey and moving all the way up to the top. This is what this had something to do with. This is important. It tells us about ourselves. It tells us about our past. It tells us about the consciousness of the ancient Egyptians. It also gives us some insight into the importance of what they were doing and what they were trying to show us about ourselves. And so this is very important. So please, please, please share this with others and let them know about this information. This is revolutionary. And it is extremely important that this kind of information gets out to everyone. Even though I'm sure that there's a little bit of some small areas where I may not be exactly on, but I can say this, based on what I'm seeing, based on the data, based on phi and everything I'm seeing, we have a map of the human body, and this is what they were trying to show us this stuff in their hieroglyphs. And when we take a look at R.A. Schwaller de Lubbock's and Ancient Egypt Science and Symbol and Symbolism, that book I was just showing you, this one right here, The Evolution of Consciousness, remember that the ancient Egyptians believed that all of nature was symbolic writing. They also believed in that the whole universe was different scales of man, and this is exactly what we're finding. We're finding it from geography all the way to giant nebulas, and everything ends right in this area called the pineal gland. The pineal gland would be considered a vortex or a black hole, which is the same thing I discovered that NASA confirmed a year later. So we'll get into that part later. We're going to start moving into Orion eventually, but I did want to show you Egypt first. Please share this with your friends. Please get this information out. It's very important that you do this, and I'll talk to you soon.